Okay, we're on the top of Hey Amid Aleph. So this is just morning referral. We're on top of Hey Amid Aleph, and we're continuing with the discussion of we had a lot of different options to explain what happens when someone, like we gave the case of Reuven, has a property that's surrounded on all four sides by Shimon, and Shimon fenced the first three, and then either Reuven or Shimon, depending on the shita, one of them finished the last portion. At that point, is Reuven responsible to pay for the benefit that he's getting now? He's being fenced in. The first shot we said, so there's a machlokes in the Mishnah about this, where Yosi said Megalgal Novasakal, and the first thing that we said about it, we said b'shem Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, that he said, I'm sorry, and we said b'shem Rav Huna, that he said Akol Lefi Masha Gadar. So therefore, we explained that the Mishnah was saying a machlokes, that Rabbi Yosi said that the Reuven is going to have to pay for whatever it was that Shimon installed. Obviously, we're talking about, not talking about, I kept on talking about luxury fencing, but it's all fencing that's providing additional security. So whatever he paid for it, that's what he paid, and that's what Reuven has to chip in for. And the Tanna Kama says, no, he only pays for a cheap fence, Kanim Bezoil, sticks, cheap sticks. And then, according to the other man who disagrees with Rav Huna and says that even Rabbi Yosi was only talking about a cheap fence, and then you have a harder question of how to describe the machlokes. So we brought a lot of different options for that. So now the Gemara brings a story that brings out the psak. Runya akfe ravina me'abaruchais. Runya, we had Runya in the end of Bava Kama. Runya was Ravina's sharecropper, and they were constantly squabbling. There's a few Gemaras where there were disagreements. And Ravina went around all four sides of Runya. Amalei Havli Kama de Gadri. And Ravina sent him an invoice and said, I would like you to pay for what I installed. Lo Yavle. And he wouldn't give. Havli Lefi Kanim Bezal. So he said, okay, listen, you don't want to go along with Rabbi Yosi according to Rav Huna, which we're going to conclude as Taka the Psak. So at least give me for a cheap fence. Lo Yavle. He wouldn't even do according to that shot, which we had said there was a tzad that says one mandama says Kanim Bezal, and the other Rabbi Yosi says Kanim Bezal, and the Tanna Kama said you have to pay for a shomer. So he said, at least give me Kanim Bezal, and he wouldn't do that. Havli agar netur. So give me at least the cost of a shomer that I'm saving you from having to pay that. Lo Yavle. Yumachad have a gagadid dikli. One day, he was Runya was working in his garden, among his date trees. Amalei Larise, and Ravina said to his worker, Zil shkol mine kibura dahini. Go take from Runya's property. It's hard to understand. The Gemara doesn't explain this, how Ravina was able to do this. He was trying to make a demonstration. He told his worker to go steal some dates from Runya. I guess he was intending to return them. He didn't really mean to have him steal them. Maybe he just made as if he was going to take them. Azulasuya. So he went, Ravina's worker, Ravina who had built this fence, his worker went to take the dates. Rama Bekala, Runya started yelling. So to me, it sounds like he chased off this worker before he could actually take them. Amalei. So Ravina said to Runya, Golas daitach the meinech nichala. We see that you're masking to my fence. So the basis for the shitas that say that Runya, that Reuven, in the case of what we were arguing before, that we were saying before, Runya in this case, the person whose property is being surrounded is getting the benefit of the fences. In a case like this, where the Makif was the one who did the fourth wall, right? Ravina was the one who did all four walls. He could say, I never wanted to have this. It's only if he was trying to say, Runya was trying to say, that we should paskin, I'm going like the mandam who says It's only when the nikif puts up the fourth wall where he indicates he's interested. So Ravina wanted to disprove that that's not even the case. You just were making believe you didn't want it, but you really did. And you see, now from the fact that you chased away my guy who was coming to take the dates, don't tell me that you didn't care about having protection. Because you see, when someone came to take dates from you, you started yelling. Even if it wouldn't have been a person, it would just be a goat could wander onto your property and eat up your dates. You would need a watchman for that. Or He says Izam is very easy to chase away. If there's a goat coming, all I have to do is make a noise and he'll run away. But you need a person standing there to yell at him. So in the end, it sounds like the basis of this taina that when the makif, the person on the outside, the person building the fence, built the fourth piece of the fourth side of the fence, that the other person, the person whose property is being protected without his involvement, his whole taina is, I don't care what happens to my field. Let the robbers run through it, let the gizim run through it, I don't care. And this Runya, by indicating a displeasure, by protesting when someone came to take, ruined his taina that since you did the fourth side, I never showed that I'm interested, because he did show. Also, the Kamei de Rava. They came to Rava. Amalei Zil Paisa Demai de Efais. He told Runya, you have to make good to Ravina. That means Ravina gave you a lot of options. So let me tell you the way I see the Gemara. I don't know if the place will go like this at all, but I'm just telling you, like learning Gemara, the way it sounds to me, is that this is all B'derech Pshara. I mean, Ravina held that the psak is like Rabbi Yossi, according to Rav Huna, that he's entitled to get paid the entire full amount. And he was arguing, that means that whatever he put out, whatever he placed, even though he was the one who did all four walls, he still is entitled to the whole thing. And Runya was saying, why you make me pay? I don't want to pay. I never wanted this. And they're arguing about trying to come to an agreement. And in the end, they had to go to Rava because Runya wouldn't accept anything. He kept on pushing him off. So Rava said, come to an agreement. But if you don't, but if not, I'm going to give you the letter of the law. And according to the letter of the law, Ravina is entitled to the entire thing. It means because we passed him like the first shot that we said all the way at the beginning of the sugya, that like the way Rav Huna had understood the Mishnah, that it's talking about even where the makif, like we said before, doesn't make a difference, loishna, whether it's a nikif or the makif who did it, and that the nikif, the person in the middle, has to pay the entire amount of whatever he laid at. So that's the conclusion of this sugya. Another story about Runya squabbling with Ravina. Runya zavan ara amitzur de Ravina. Runya bought a piece of property right next to the property of Ravina. So Ravina sluka mishum din de bar metzra. If you remember back in Bava Kama, we discussed the din of the bar metzra, and the din of bar metzra is really it rests on the person who's doing the purchase. The person who's buying, when he buys, the person who has the din of bar metzra can go and take him to din that he should convey it over to him. So that's what Ravina wanted to do to Runya. Amli Rav Safra, Breder Rav Yevel Ravina, Amri Inchi, Arba Litzela, Arba Litzlola. So there's a lot of different taichin of this, which Rashi brings a whole bunch of them. The first one is, he says, it takes 4 loaves of bread for a rich tanner to live on, and it takes 4 loaves for a poor tanner. That means everyone has a certain amount of basic necessities that they need to live. And this Runya was a poor man. So he's saying he has a lot of expenses. You're a wealthy man, Ravina. Ravina was very wealthy, and he's poor. Don't impose on him the din of the Metzra, which comes from Vasisa Yashav HaToiv. You should do Hayashav HaToiv to Runya and allow him to keep that property, because you're coming Mikayach Hayashav HaToiv. Yashav HaToiv should also dictate you shouldn't hassle him about this property, which to me might also be enlightening about the previous Gemara, where Ravina was trying to come to an agreement with Runya that was not kafi the din. And it's possibly because Runya was a poor man and Ravina was trying to come to an accommodation, but Runya was not being at all accommodating. So that's why he had to be told, come, you better figure out something that works because the din is not on your side. Look the Mishnah. Kaisel Chatzah Shenaf. We had this Mishnah earlier. Kaisel Chatzah Shenaf al Mechai B'Neisei L'Vneisei. We said earlier in the Gemara that a kaisel that was already there between two parts of a chatzor or two chatzeris, you are mechayev them to rebuild it. Even though we said it's possible hezek riyah is lav shmei hezek, I think that's what we concluded. But once you already have a wall, like we said before, then it certainly is hezek riyah. People got used to living with the wall in between, so that you could require either one of them could require the other one to rebuild it. Obviously, if both of them agree not to build it, it's not a problem. Ad arba amas b'chaskes shenasa. And if the wall is built, let's say Reuven and Shimon built the wall, and Shimon took upon himself, I'm going to be the one to build it, and he comes to Reuven 6 months after the wall is built, and he says, "You owe me. It costs $200. You owe me $100 for your half of the wall." We say b'chaskes shenasa. The chazaka is that it became due, as Rashi says, the price, the cost of compensating for the wall came due as soon as the wall was built. And everyone knows the halacha that once there's a wall that fell down, they both have to chip in. So we assume that Reuven paid immediately, and Shimon can't say, you never paid. So it's a cheskes shenosan. Unless Shimon brings a raya that Reuven did not pay at the right time. However, like we said, this halacha only applies up to Daled Amas. This din that you have to replace a wall, hezek riyah is ameliorated with a 4 amma high wall, which is essentially 6 feet or 8 feet. Anything more than that is not necessary. So that's all that he can require, even by a chayil shenafel. It doesn't replace it the way it was. He just has to replace it to get rid of the hezek riyah, the damage of being done from being visible. So midalas maila ein mechayv. You don't require Shimon to chip in for the wall. However, if Reuven built this wall of the 20 feet high, or 8 amos, and then Shimon said, I never agreed to pay up to 8 amos. All I want to do is do 4 amos. But then afterwards, Shimon built another wall of 8 amos high next to Reuven's original wall. And he wants to make like he's building himself a whole shed over there. He's going to make himself a whole new room at him. Even though he hasn't gotten as far as putting on the roof between the two walls and making a real usable space, at that point, he has to pay for the additional 4 amos that Reuven had added on to the wall that he wasn't mechoyev in the beginning. And on this, the chazaka is that he didn't pay it. He can't say that I paid it originally. That means now Shimon built his second wall, and he's saying, and Reuven says, okay, now you have to pay me for the additional 4 amos that I built my wall higher. And Shimon says, no, I paid you back at the time that you built it. Then there's no chazaka that Shimon paid it, because he's not required to pay b'shas ma'isa. It's only after he builds his second wall that Shimon becomes mechuyev on the extra portion of the first wall. A similar din, a din that's intimately connected with this question, with this discussion in the Mishnah. If Reuven borrows money from Shimon, and Reuven says, I'll pay you back in a year the $100. At the end of the year comes, and Shimon says, where's my money? And Reuven says, I already paid it after 6 months. Rish Lakish says, you don't believe a borrower that he paid early. And as many of us might have experienced, halavai you get paid even at the end of the year. It defies belief to believe that a borrower voluntarily came and offered the money early. Abaye v'Rava da'ami travayu, no. Ovid inish to parabagoy's money. A person might on occasion pay early. Zimnin de misrami lezuzi. Maybe he'll come into money. I don't want to be in the position where this guy is going to come asking me for the money and putting pressure on me. I'll prepay. I'll prepay early. This is all a very different discussion than prepayments on our mortgages, because Jews, we don't do ribbis. There's no interest. So, it's very rare in a situation with no ribbis that a person will prepay. Of course, if you have a mortgage, it's to your benefit to prepay to stop paying interest. It's not. So we want to bring a raya on this question, this machlekes between Rish Lakish and Abaye and Rava. Rish Lakish says person won't prepay, and Abaye and Rava say they will. It's not. We learned in our Mishnah. The first case of our Mishnah, we said that everyone knows that a wall that fell down, both parties have to chip in. So we say that there's a chazakah that let's say, like we said, Reuven built the wall, that Shimon paid, unless Reuven can prove that he didn't pay at the time that the wall was built. If we're talking about where Shimon said, I paid as soon as you finished the wall, Pshita, it's Pashat, of course he's believed. Everyone is believed to say Praticha Bezmani. When it becomes Mechoyev, at that point you're Mechoyev to pay. If there's a lot of Rishonim and Taisus about whether we're talking about with Eidim, Shaloi Be'edim, what's the exact circumstances of this loan. But the general idea is that a person does pay Bezmani, so why shouldn't he believe? Elamai must be talking about where Shimon said, I paid, you built the wall, you started to build a wall in June and you finished it in July, and I paid even before you finished the wall. We're saying, even so, our Mishnah is saying that he's Neman. L'chayr, it's a raya to Abaye and Rava that a person would occasionally pay, because that must be the case in order for our Mishnah to be telling us a chiddush. So Gemara, even though it's very interesting, because our Gemara had a whole discussion, and we had to say that there's a din that once the wall fell down, that everyone knows that you have to pay for that. But why can't that be the chiddush? Why do we have to make the chiddush is that even though he paid early? So Gemara Shani Hacha. No. The reason why it's a chiddush over here is the whole shavu v'shavu zmani. The zman, unlike what Rashi had said, what the assumption was, like on the top Rashi, when he finished the whole Dalet Amos. The Gemara is saying that the zmani is not when you finish every Dalet Amos, but rather the zmani is each row of bricks of the wall is zmani. So when he says Praticha Bizmani, it means that he's saying I paid it after one row. But not everyone knows necessarily the rule that each row is separate. So that's the chiddush. That's the chiddush of our Mishnah, that a person that the chiyuv becomes due on the non-building partner with each row, and that's when he becomes the chiyuv. Now we're going to try to bring another raya. At the end of the Mishnah, we said that if Ruvain built the wall, I said to 8 amos, let's make it 10 amos. So he built it to 10 amos, which Shimon is only obligated for the first 4 amos. But then later Shimon builds a wall of 10 amos next to this 10 amos. So that at that point it becomes incumbent on him to pay for the additional 6 amos that Reuven had paid for, because now he's making use of it. So he said on that, if Shimon claims after he builds his wall of 10 amos, and now he's chayiv to chip in with Reuven, he says, "Oh, I already paid Reuven for the additional 6 amos, for the entire 10 amos back when he built it." He's not believed. If we're saying that he says, "I paid Ruvain when I finished my 10 amas. That's when it became due, the additional 6 amas. So that's when I paid Ruvain for the additional 6 amas. And my life, why shouldn't he believe that that point became due? And that's when he paid it. Elamai must be that he said I paid earlier. I'm a loyal with him, money. So you see, it's a raya that he's not neman on that. It's like, well, no, shani hacha, the amar mi yeme de v'chayveli rabbanon. It could even be that he paid bismani. He paid after he built his second wall, but he wasn't sure of this halacha. Is it really true that now it becomes megalgal on me that I have to pay? He could say, listen, if you wouldn't have built that 10 amma wall, I wouldn't have built my 10 amma wall. But why should I be responsible? Because you decided on your own initiative to add on. So it's not such a clear halacha that we would say that he's naman to say bismani, because you don't know that he knows what the halacha is, that he's mechuyev to pay. Rav Papa, Rav Huna Braid of Yeshua, Avdi Kabai, Rava, they pass like Kabai and Rava that a person will pay b'toich money. Ba'abar Ravashi, Avad Kuresh Shlachas. They did like Rish Lakish, that person not named. V'helvus a Kuresh Lakish. Halacha is taka like Rish Lakish. Ba'filu miyasmi. And this halacha would be applied even if Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon, and then Ruvain died, and now Shimon is coming to collect from the Yisayim, and they have obviously karka that's meshubit, so therefore he's able to be gaiva. And the Yisayim say that our father paid early; he paid before this man. Say no, since there's a chazaka, we pass like Rish Lakish, even though you take from Yisayim who have a diminished ability to argue on myself, and we protect Yisayim, we won't protect them so far as to make an argument on their behalf that you paid. That the debt was paid up early, right? If Ruvain made up he's going to pay the money in August of 2024, and now he died in June of 24, we assume he didn't pay it up. Even though generally when someone gets paid from Yisayim, he has to make a shvua in order to be mitzi the moment, since they can't make a shvua. There's still a chazaka that we'll apply over here, and we'll say that in this case he didn't pay. They don't have to make a shvua to be mitzi, because we can assume a chazaka which has the strength almost like a edus that he didn't pay in this case. Now the Gemara asks, Iboilu tavu la'achar zman. So let's go back to our case, right? Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon. And Shimon comes and says, I want my money. You owe me money. You owe me $100, and it became due already a month ago. And Reuven says, I know it became due a week ago, but I paid you already a month ago. Mom, what do you say in this case? Do we say that Reuven has a migo? He could have just said, I paid up a week ago. It became due, let's say, on June 1st. And that's when I paid you. Even though I actually said I paid you on May 1st, but I could have said June 1st. It's no skin off my back to say June 1st. I said May 1st because that's what happened. So therefore, I believed with the migo, in spite of the fact that there's a chazaka that a person doesn't pay earlier, well, like you said, it's a lot of strength. It's almost like an edus, an anan sadi, that such a thing never happens. And as I see from Rafal's expression, he agrees that that's a rare thing to happen. Or do we say, no, this presumption is so strong that the migo wouldn't overturn it? So I just want to go back now to the Taisvis. Sorry, we're going back a little bit. Taisvis that starts on the bottom of Hey Amid Aleph, the last Taisvis. So first of all, we're just going to see the first point of Taisvis, which is good to see. We're talking this whole sugya that we're talking about, the discussion whether the person pays early or not, is talking about where there are edim as to the original debt, and that there was a zman. So all that is put on the side. Okay, and then we'll go to the end of that Taisus, The im timer on the first narrow line. Im timer. Mikol makam nifshim yachad lo yamrin migu. Lo yamrin migu. Diboy amar praticha at timer. The iboy amar praticha. He's saying, why is this question, we're making like a new question now, whether you say migu. Why doesn't that question of migu apply to the original machlekes Abaye and Rav and Rish Lakish? Why don't you have every case of someone who says, I paid it early, he should always have a migu that he could have said, I paid it bismani. So what is this whole machlekes? The machlekes of Abaye and Rav against Rish Lakish should really be subsumed into this current question of whether there's a migu connected chazaka. Meaning, even if we assume like Rish Lakish, it's a migu that a person, not a migu, that there's a presumption that a person doesn't pay, but he still always has a migu that he could say, It's true that you would assume I wouldn't do it, but I have a migu that I could have said I did it later. So Taisus answers, "V'Amri Dali Chashem migu." Given the married, the kind be yoim achron shozman. We're talking about where he paid on the actual day of the payment. A person does pay on that day. That he can't say amigo. They said I already paid earlier today. To say that I already paid you today, that a person doesn't have the chutzpah to say. If he's saying I paid a month ago, he can't say amigo that, I paid earlier today, this morning, which is the day. Because that's a chutzpah. You're standing in front of the guy, you're saying 3 hours ago I paid you. That's hard to do. But he could say, let's say it was a week later, a week after this man passed, and he says, I paid you a month ago, but I have a migo that I could have said I paid you a week ago. And even though the guy is standing there saying, no, you didn't pay, even though you would say you didn't pay me a week ago, I would be able to say, I did pay you, but you forgot it. So that's more, you have that. So the two questions are not synonymous. This shiloh of the Gemara here is not the same. It's not always going to be applicable in the machlekes Abaye Rava and Rish Lakish. So now the Gemara is going to try to answer this question. Tashma. Let's try to get to the two dots. It'll be good. Whatever we can always, as we know, it's always good to get things under our belt and also not to have to restart this sugya. Tashma. We said in our Mishnah that in the case, it's basically going to be a repeat of the Gemara on Amid Beis. If Ruvain built the wall and he built it to 4 amas after it fell down, we say that Shimon is required to participate, and the chazaka that he did participate as he was required to is bisman. We say Tashma if we're talking about where Reuben asked for the money later, and Shimon said, I paid after you finished Pshita. Elamai must be we said, I paid the Why is he believed? It must be, even though we hold like Rish Lakish, but he has a migo, and that's the reason why he's believed. So the Gemara answers like it answered before. Just like we answered when we originally wanted to bring a raya to Abaye and Rava, we answered Shani Hacha the Chol Shefa v'Shefa Zmanihu. This is not so clear. People don't realize that every row is a different chiyuv, and that's when he paid it bismani. So that could be the chiddush. Toshma midal ramasol ma'ile mechavin oisoi samach lekoisel acher achi yavi raya shenosan. So the second case in the Mishnah, we say that he's not believed until the person being tevei is not believed until the person who's required to pay, Shimon, who has to chip in now that he built a parallel wall, he's not believed until he brings a raya that he already paid. If it's talking about he asked him for the money after this, and he said I paid this money, he should be believed. So over here it's a chiddush even to say that he paid bismani. We don't have to get into the question of b'toich zmani. That was never the chiddush. We didn't have to say the Mishnah was saying that chiddush. Tashma. Monali biyad. Shimon says to Reuben, "You have there's $100 of mine that you have." Amalei hid. And he said, "Yes." Lamacha Amalei tneili. And the next day he said to him, "Give it to me." Im Amar nasativ lach potter. If he says, "I already gave it to you," he's potter. In the chayav. But if on the other hand he says, I never took it from you," or well, he can't say I never took it because he already admitted that he took it from you. But he says, "I don't have anything. I already paid it back."
It's not the same as Mitzvah.
He's just saying, he's saying I don't have anything. He's chayiv. My love. So we're gonna have to understand what this means. My love. When he says that I already gave it to you, he's saying bizman. And El Chabiyadi is his way of saying it's nothing of mine. What are you coming to me? I paid you even before I was mechayiv to give it to you. It means it's a more, even though it sounds like he's saying I never had it, what he really means to say is it's more extreme than what you're claiming. I know it wasn't mine in my hands for a long time. Why isn't he? He could have said the same way he said that I paid it early. He could have said I paid it bismani. So you see, he doesn't have a migu. So what he's trying to say is, like I read it incorrectly before, that he meant to say that I never borrowed from you. So since and once he says that I didn't borrow, then he can't say that I paid you bismani. He lost his kaya chataina to say I paid you bismani because you already said you didn't own it at all. In our Mishnah, we said that if he added a second wall, right? If Shimon added a second wall next to Reuven's, after Reuven extended the wall above its time, we say he has to pay Reuven even for the additional part that he added above the base. Amravuna Samach. You know what? We're not going to start this. We'll stop over here.
Right.
Okay, shkayach.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Tomorrow in shul?
No, I'm not going to be in shul. I'm probably going to be in Lakewood. Do you have a